All right, we are live. Thank you for joining us. My name is Alexandra Alvarado. I'm the Director of Marketing and Education at the American Apartment Owners Association. I am so happy to have with me two very special guests from Inago Property Management Software. We're going to do a quick interview with Dave here, Dave Spooner. He's the co-founder of Inago, and Tanvir Sattar, who's the Director of Business Development. And they're going to give us some more information about property management software in general, they're a little bit about their story and how they got started, and then also how you can implement some of these features that they have on their software into your own rental property business. So I'm really excited to get it started. Dave, can you tell us a little bit about Inago to get started?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, thanks so much for having us. We're really excited to be here, especially live. So Inago is rental management software, just like you said, designed for small to mid-sized landlords. Whether you're a DIYer or a property manager with 5 employees underneath you, you probably don't have a lot of time on your hands. And Inago is built to be a really simple, really easy to learn software that can take a lot of the pressure and a lot of the things that you're doing day to day off your hands. So that includes things like paying rent online, automating late fees, tenant screening, online lease signing, communicating back and forth with your tenants. All sorts of different features are included in the package, and it's free to use, of course. So it's software that's free to use, but feels like it should cost money.
Yeah, I think that's like the most important part you ended with.
Very the lead.
So that is uncommon. Most property management software you do have to pay for. So what led you to start Inago and make it a free property management software?
Yeah, so I was involved pretty early on in a company that was building a college listing site, right? It was supposed to help tenants and landlords in student housing better connect with one another. And through that process, I got a lot of exposure to small to mid-sized independent landlords. That's mostly who comprises student housing. And we kept hearing over and over and over again that these landlords, first of all, didn't really care about a listing site, which was definitely useful information for us, but also that they really, really, really wanted tools that were easier to use, easier to pick up in their very limited free time, and didn't have a high barrier to entry. And the biggest barrier, of course, is cost. So finally, after hearing that for a couple of years, myself and our co-founder at Inago, Yasser Drabu, who's now our CTO, we decided, hey, we can do this. We can give them these tools. In the interest of provide, we worked on a lot of different pricing models. We tried a lot of different things out, and eventually we settled on, hey, people want this kind of stuff for free. We can find other ways to monetize it. We can find other ways to bring value. Let's give it to them for free. And that's what we did pretty shortly after starting Inago.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, that's like one of the first softwares I've heard of that are completely free to use. So that's amazing. And I'm also curious too about your backstory a little bit. I know Dave and Tanvir, you work very closely together. You're in the same office, and you have marketing and sales that you're working on together. How did you two meet? What sparked that encounter?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take this one. So Dave and I, it's going to be 4 years of us working together here next month. So nice. It's gone by really quick. So we met like any other young professionals would on a basketball court. So some friends of friends got a game together. First game, Dave and I were both odd men out. So we're fully hydrated, not sweating yet. So we're talking a little shop, trying to figure out what each person did. And Dave kind of introduced me to the idea of Inago, said he was, just getting this off the ground. I came from a consulting background. So I worked in Ernst & Young and another consulting firm for about 7 years at the time. And I was really interested in getting into sales. I loved developing relationships with people. And then I also had the background of consulting where I could help Dave out. So that Dave didn't give me a job right there on the spot, but it kind of sparked my interest. We played a couple of games of basketball over the next couple of months. We sat down, had a cup of coffee. I kind of told him like, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. And at that point, Inago was not funded at all yet. So he said, that's great, but I'm going to hire you on as an intern. So I took a leap of faith with Inago. So I was probably the oldest intern we've ever had. At that time, 30 years old, and just right off in the movie. And then we got started, and the rest is history.
That's exciting. So, okay, so it's been 4 years now.
Mhm.
What lessons have you learned? Actually, wait, so Inago was founded more than 4 years ago, right? And then you joined in. And then since then, I'm sure you've learned a ton. What would
Mhm.
you say is some of the biggest lessons that you guys have both learned along the way?
Yeah, so Inago started middle of January 2017, and then I
Mhm.
started in August 2017.
Got
So
it.
that's why I'm coming upon my fourth birthday. But as far as biggest lessons learned, and this was a big learning curve from me coming more of a corporate environment, was just kind of how much Dave supported customer support. Like that was his bedrock. That was what he believed in. And it
Mhm.
was something that it took me a long time to get used to, because just customer support in general wasn't something I was familiar with, but it's something that we have really from day one have put the customer first. Because when someone signs up for Inago, it's the same thing as when you get in your first smartphone, right? You have a lot of questions. I know my parents give me a call and ask a lot of questions anytime they have software issues, and that's kind of what I feel like what we're doing on the customer support side is we have always been there. At the beginning, it was just Dave and I helping out all groups of people from all walks of life with customer support, and our customer support team has grown ever since that.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
if I could piggyback on that really quickly, Alexandra, Tanvir's heard this a million times. So he's gonna be like, not again, Dave. But especially when we were first starting out, we kind of identified early on that there's really three things, especially as a software company. But I think this is true for most businesses. There's three things that can make your company the best, right? You can be the best at marketing and selling your product. You can be the best product in the market, right? You're delivering the most value, or you can have the best customer support. And when you're first starting out, there's no way you can have the best product, right? There's no way you can have the best marketing. We had great product at the outset, but it wasn't the best by any means. There were companies that had been around for years and years. We had a different spin on it, but it wasn't necessarily the best. But we could be the best at customer support. So we really made sure that that was a central pillar of everything that we did. And now, we're confident that we do have the best product, right? We're confident that we have, possibly the best marketing team out there, but we still are committed to that customer support. So it really was a central kind of foundational piece for us. And if I could also just real quickly answer the question, I think the biggest thing that I learned, and Tanvir was a big part of this, was the importance of building the right team around you. Eventually you run out of time. You can't do it all yourself, and understanding not just that you can delegate, but sometimes other people are a lot better at things than you are, right? That they can accomplish things. They have their own special set of tools and techniques and approaches that may be far better than what you can bring to the table. And understanding that and learning to rely on team members and build out a really great team and continuing to commit to the team members that we do bring on, that's been a huge and really great lesson for me throughout this process.
Interesting you say that. I recently interviewed a real estate investor with a similar thought, is just the team. You
Yeah.
ask like, what's your investment secrets? Like, how do you have the best, portfolio or whatever it is? And he's like, I don't, it's my team,
Yep.
And so whatever you do, it's about having the right team. And I also really love the customer support aspect. We're really big on customer support too. So, if you start with that, you can't go wrong, and then you get to know what your customers actually want. So it's probably why your
Exactly.
features are really helpful for people. I like that. So speaking of rental property ownership, I heard that you both are rental property owners. So I'd love to know how that has influenced your features and your experience with different things that you've done with Inago.
Yeah. Well, like you said, I mean, customer support has been such a great way to learn directly from landlords what they want. But for the first year or two, I did not own any properties. But about 3 years ago, I purchased my first, and I now have 8 rental units. So I'm a DIY landlord, just like lots and lots of our users. And it's been great to learn from that experience. I use Inago, of course, makes my life really easy, but I also have been able to conceptualize some of the challenges and problems that maybe were a little harder for me to understand before. And there's definitely been features that have come directly out of that. One that's coming in the not too distant future is actually a maintenance scheduler. So, it's really annoying to remember to go change air filters in your furnaces every 3 months, right? So it's great to be able to set a scheduled calendar within a platform like Inago, and it reminds you directly, hey, don't forget to change the furnace filters, and you can mark it as resolved, or you can mark it as incomplete, or make comments on it or whatever. So that's just one example of a feature that came directly from that, but there's been plenty of others.
Yeah, that's great. I imagine, it's kind of nice to be able to develop your own features on your software for, like, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I need that.
Right.
That's great. So we want to get to know just a little bit more about you both. Is there something about you that most people don't know that, our audience might be curious to find out about?
I don't know how exciting mine is, but keeping in the rental property realm, not even rental, but just property realm. My wife and I purchased a fixer upper not too long ago, and I have learned that I am not very handy. So now the rest of the world can learn that too. It's harder than you think.
And me both.
Yeah. So my wife and I, we bought our first home a couple years back as well, and she knew already that I wasn't the fixer upper. We both were Joanne Gaines in the process. We both had the creative eye, but no one was swinging the hammer. So she wanted a fixer upper. I wanted a turnkey. So we definitely settled on the turnkey. Life's great for both of us. But since I don't have any projects to work on like Dave, I spend a lot of my free time playing soccer. So I play 2 or 3 nights a week, and
nice.
It's something I really enjoy.
That's fun. All right. Well, we'll get back to property management.
Okay.
So obviously we've had like an insane last 18 and whatever, how many months it's been, right? Because of the pandemic. And I'm really curious to see like what you think on your perspective is the biggest challenge that landlords are facing today as we exit the pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like the pandemic definitely put a microscope, on this, but I think whether it was pandemic or not, the things that I'm going to talk about right now, they don't change, right? When you become a landlord, there's going to be some things that you control. So you can control what property you're buying, what insurance company you want to go with, what realtor you're going with. When you do get the property, am I going to update some of the appliances? Am I going to wait a few years? Am I going to update the roof? Things like that. So all that is in my control. That's in Dave's control for the properties we own, and then our users on Inago. But the thing we cannot control is the tenants, right? Who is moving into the property? So that's something that I think it took me a long time to understand until I was a property owner, but it's something that the first time I talk to a landlord, I always say, whether it's your first unit or your 100th unit, make sure you spend some time thinking about your application and thinking about the questions you want to ask. Do you want to let pets in to your property? Do you not? Things like that. Those are questions that you want to add to your application. That way you can get a really good tenant in place. So the first thing is creating a really good custom application. The second is screening the tenant, right? The tenant can put on the application any answers they want. Use a third party to screen your tenants. That way you can get a criminal check, a credit check, and a background check. I know it's something AAOA offers, and also Inago as well.
Dave, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's really well said. I mean, tenant screening, to bring it back to the pandemic for a second, I mean, I had 8 units through the pandemic, and we were able to keep all those units filled, and our tenants pretty much paid on time every single month. And we made some rent concessions to help them get through that. We waived a half month's rent for our tenants, and held late fees and kind of spread some payments around for people. But they were able to get through it because they had solid income, because they passed our very thorough screening practices, and we knew they were great renters. And if you had bad renters during the pandemic, you're probably still dealing with the fallout. So it really, like Tanvir said, it's shown a microscope on the importance of having great tenants and the importance of going through those rigorous screening practices. Can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I also think something I saw on my end was just the lack of communication. I think a lot of landlords they take a step back and they kind of let it run itself if the tenant's paying rent every month, but the tenant doesn't really have a relationship with the landlord at all in some cases. And, in those cases, they found out, well, it's a lot harder for me to start a relationship when it's based on, okay, you can't pay your rent versus like checking in with them on a regular basis. And I know that takes extra time and whatnot, but, certainly I think that also is a big thing. It's just the communication aspect. Okay. So, you guys, your DIY sort of property management, Dave, with your own 8 units. Let's say we have some landlords, because I know we have a lot of them in AAOA that are growing their portfolio. They get to like about a dozen units and then they're like, uh-oh, this is a lot more work. What do I do? So obviously Inago might make that easier for them, but they're also considering, should I just hire a property manager? Should I hire a property management company? Is it worth it? So if you're talking to a landlord like that, what kind of advice might you give to them to make that decision?
Yeah, I can start us off here. So I would say, the DIY person and the person who's going to go with property management, that they're both, it just really depends on their situation. So that's the first thing you need to think about. So Dave is in Cincinnati, he's local, he can do the DIY thing. For the properties that I have, they're 1,500 miles out of state.
Wow.
So anytime that I probably would need a property manager, the nice thing is we have family that's right near the properties, so they can run it, and then I can also use Inago to do rent collections and things like that, that probably weren't available in the last 10 or 15 years. So there's a time and place for each, and you really need to figure out how it works in your portfolio.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is, if you are going to go with a property management company, that's going to take 8 to 12% of your revenue. So is that something you're comfortable with? Someone in my dad's position or Dave's dad, that they're getting close to retirement, it might make sense to them. They just want to golf 7 days a week and they don't want to deal with any rent collections or a maintenance request or anything like that. So they're like, okay, I'm going to get rid of this 8 to 12%. I'm going to pay a property management company and I'm okay with the results. Where someone like Dave and I, who are younger in our careers and we want more revenue, so we're gonna stick to doing the DIY. I think that's something that you really need to think about as you get set up in this process. Dave, anything to add?
Yeah, just if, I think like Tanvir said, there's absolutely a place for property managers. We in fact work with tons and tons of property managers. We're not just landlords exclusively or DIYers. I think the key is, as you're evaluating property management companies, recognize that they are going to be the face that the tenant puts on you, right? The tenant is gonna think about the property management company as a representation of you. So make sure that they're representing you well. And that's not just in their business practices, which are obviously critical. That's not just in the cost that they charge you. It's also in the software that they use. So evaluate that piece of it. Be sure to get references, do all your due diligence, almost just like you would with a tenant, in order to make sure that they're going to represent you well. And also understand, one just last quick item, understand the difference between a property manager and a property management company. Once you hit a certain number of units, it may actually be more cost effective to bring somebody onto your team instead of going out and hiring a whole company that's going to, obviously take a decent chunk on the revenue side of things. So you could add to your team, you could augment your team, build that out as an alternative if you feel like you've got, too much going on your end.
Yeah, that's actually really true. And then also, even if it is more of a hands-off thing, you still have to check in with that property management company or property
100%.
manager, make sure they're doing their job too. So there is still a little bit of work involved. I think no matter how you look at it, it's never truly 100% passive, but we try to get there as much as we can.
That's right.
Yeah. So, okay. So you mentioned if you do have a property management company or property manager, you want to know what kind of software they're using. Likewise for yourself, you also want to have a good software. So what are some of the features that they should be looking for when they're shopping around for a software?
Yeah, I would say the first thing, and anytime I have like an intro call with a landlord, is really think about, okay, what do I want to streamline in my life, right? For me, I'm 1,500 miles away in my properties. So the first thing I want is online rent collections. But the first thing Dave wants is more of a maintenance calendar because his properties are closer to him. So evaluating what makes sense in your business model. Pick 3 or 4 things that are going to really make your life easier, and then take a look at what property management software makes sense.
That actually makes a lot of sense, because there are some softwares that have so many different features, and I don't know that all landlords necessarily need all the features, right? They just
Mhm.
sort of need whatever they need and need that done well, right? So when we're looking at, we touched on this briefly, but we're looking at what types of landlords are using Inago. You mentioned you do have some property managers and property management companies that use Inago. What's the type of landlord that you would say uses this software that you guys have?
Yeah, so I would say our smallest landlord has 1 unit, and
Oh.
it's a lot of new landlords or landlords that are just comfortable with having 1 unit. Our largest has over 2,000, and as Dave alluded to earlier, we have property management companies that use Inago. We have DIY landlords that use Inago, but when you average it all out, it's about 35 units. Is the average number of units per landlord in Inago. But we work with mixed portfolios. So whether you're strictly residential, strictly commercial, or both, that's totally fine to use. Dave, anything to add?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's well said. We really, as I mentioned before, we focus on ensuring that Inago is really flexible to use, it really easy to use, but also offers a depth of features. And I think it's a testament to that we can work with such a wide range. I mean, our bread and butter from a marketing and sales standpoint is 1 to 100 units. That's what we talk about and focus on. We have tons of landlords with way more units than that. And we also, this is my favorite part, we have landlords that are not really landlords. Like, for example, a lot of people sign up with us that own salons these days, and they rent out their chairs to different hairdressers or barbers or whoever. We also have people that own, there's some like restaurant warehouses that will use a centralized place to do carry out, that rent their little kitchens using our software. Basically anything you can rent, because Inago is flexible in the way it is, you can use Inago for. So bread and butter, 1 to 100 units, but we're all over the map beyond that.
I had never even considered that for a property management. That's crazy. Okay. What kind of processes does Inago automate? We've talked a lot about just how it streamlines things. What would you say is the bread and butter, I guess, of what is automated on Inago?
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. Really, anything that you're doing repetitively, we can pretty much automate for you. So, of course, online payments is a really big one, right? The first time that you receive a payment on the first of the month of all of your rent from all 10, 20, 30 of your tenants, it really changes your world. So online payments is a huge one. Signing documents can be automated in large part. Screening tenants, major chunks of that can be automated. Handling maintenance tickets and forwarding it amongst team members, assigning it to team members, all those pieces can be automated. You touched on a huge one earlier, Alexandra, which is communication with your tenants. Communication is such an important piece of managing your tenants effectively, and automating those things that are like, hey, don't forget to pay rent today, or hey, late fees are about to stack up on you, or even just a welcome packet that you want to send to all your tenants when they move in. These are all things that we automate for you that just add a nice touch, a nice bow on top of the package for your landlord, your property management company.
I like that, especially the welcome feature. That's great. And then also too, so you mentioned all these features. What would you say is the most used feature by those landlords in that 0 to 100 unit range?
So if you asked our customer service team, they would say the customer service aspect. But if you ask Dave and I would say first and foremost is the online rent collection. Going back to the pandemic, we've had so many landlords come over that were kind of hesitant about the online rent collection, or just quote want to do things the old school way. But now seeing transferring funds without touching hands is actually a good thing, and definitely more sustainable. So after online rent collection, the second biggest feature used is what we talked about a little earlier, is tenant screening. We do have a lot of people that come over just that use us for screening, because we have an application builder that you can build out a custom application.
Nice.
And then send it electronically to tenants, either via email or text, or you can create that on your own website. And then the last is, which I think is a pretty big differentiator, and that people are in shock that we give it away for free, is document signing. So you can sign leases, and then you can also sign addendums and anything else that you want to sign on Inago. Dave and the product development team over the last 12 months has put a lot of time into this. So I would say it's best on the market. So definitely after this, if you have some time to take a look at that, it is a great feature.
Yeah, I've actually sent over some of our members to you because of that feature, because
Oh, yeah?
we have the forms, right? So we have
Yeah.
these amazing custom statewide specific forms, and
Mhm.
you know, the signing aspect is always such a pain. And then there's
Mhm.
DocuSign, there's all these other ones, but they charge a fee, which I
Mhm.
guess is all right. But then you also have to have another account on there and all that. So
Mhm.
that's great. I love that you offer that. So that's one thing I think that sets you apart alone,
Mhm.
right? Obviously, the big one I see is the free aspect, right?
Mhm.
That's not really, I haven't seen it for, at least I've seen some softwares do it and then they change and they start charging later. And I
Mhm.
don't think you have plans to do that. It
No
doesn't seem, it seems
plans.
like that's a core business model of yours. So
Yeah.
what other features would you say sets you apart other than that, the free aspect?
Yeah, Tanvir hit three big ones, but I think the communication and automating a lot of that communication piece of it's a big one. Another one that I hear people talk about a lot, which I think they're all surprised by just how impactful it is once they start using it, is our late fee features. Now it seems fairly innocuous, right? It's okay, it's late fees. You can automate some late fees, but our late fees are kind of, it's really simplifying a complex process. You can charge percentage fees, you can charge repeating fees, you can charge a flat fee and then hit them with a percentage fee later and then a repeating fee later on. You can do all sorts of complex late fees. And one of the beauties of charging a fee in this manner and doing it through a platform like Inago is that, the classic tale of the late fee for most landlords, especially when they're doing things on their own without property management software, is if a tenant is late, let's say they're 5 days late, right? The landlord calls them up and they say, hey, John, you're 5 days late, $50 late fee. You need to get me that and the $500 rent you owe me. And you need to do it in 2 days or I'm writing up a 3-day notice to quit, whatever it is in your state. The tenant always freaks out and they say, oh man, I got to get this rent together. They cut you a check, they put it in your mailbox. You see it in your mailbox. You're like, nice, they paid me rent. You open it up, it's $500. It doesn't have the late fee included, right? This always happens to the landlord. Now the landlord has to make a decision. Do I call up this tenant again and chase this $50? Do I just accept this and move on? It's only $50. Do I really care? Most landlords go with the latter option. They say, whatever, I'm not gonna chase this $50. Unfortunately, they've taught their tenant three things, right? They've taught their tenant that, hey, they don't need to pay their late fee, right? It's just an empty threat. Two, the landlord's going to call them up and notify them when they're late and when rent is due. And three, the landlord makes empty threats. They don't mean it. They don't have teeth when they bark, right? And those are terrible lessons to teach your tenants. So when you first start using a platform that's going to automatically assign those late fees, that's going to automatically notify your tenants of those late fees stacking up, and the tenant can't pay the next month's rent until they've paid the prior month plus the late fee, it's really powerful. All of a sudden, tenants are paying late fees. All of a sudden, tenants are not paying late anymore after a couple of months. It's really incredibly effective. It really changes the collection game. It's not just about no longer having to drive to the bank. It's about the entire collection process. And I think that's a big feature that after just a couple of months, people will reach out to us and say, I had no idea what impact this was going to make on my business, but it's, tremendously positive.
It's so true. I mean, it really is a psychological game more than anything. And we had someone from a rent collection agency come in and speak to our members, and they thought that she was going to tell them like, oh, this is the procedure. And really, it was all psychological. She's like, this is what we do. We just psychologically, we have all these tactics to establish, relationships with tenants in a way that makes them pay. And you'd be surprised what those tactics are. I mean, they're pretty simple, but certainly anybody can do them. Anybody can establish that. And psychologically, when it's there in front of you and it's automated, I mean, you can't deny it. So it's harder to get away with, I guess.
Right.
So that's actually a really good point. So I want to wrap up with just a couple more things. And one is here, you've spoken quite a bit about customer support, which is amazing. But if somebody wants to start using Inago, okay, they know you have the customer support, but what if they're like, well, is this going to be a lot of work? Is it going to be too hard for me to learn? What would you say about that and using your software and how easy it might be for someone?
Yeah, so when you're first getting started, it depends. So are you transitioning from another platform or are you picking up software the first time ever, right? If you're transitioning from another platform, you're going to find that a lot of the tools from a broad feature set standpoint, we're offering many of the same things that other platforms are, right? You're going to find consistencies across. And for the most part, those will be easy to pick up, easy to understand, easy to conceptualize. If you're coming from no software at all, honestly, it's even better because you have no baggage from other software where you're like, this software did it this way, or this software did it another way. But generally, you're going to find that there's fairly similar feature sets and fairly easy to pick up and use. I would say the biggest difference between us and other platforms is two things. One, we are there to hold your hand, right? We have worked really, really hard to take complex challenges and make them simple and make them easy to engage with. But we recognize that there's a learning curve for everybody. For some people, it's a really steep learning curve. For other people, it's nice and easy. Whichever side of that equation you're on, we're going to be there to help you. We have videos that can walk you through different features. We have our customer support team, which is available for you to jump on the phone or talk through email or send screenshots or whatever. Tanvir does an awesome job hosting a webinar every couple weeks where we teach new users how to use Inago, which is great to leverage not just the questions that you have, but to also hear questions from other landlords. So that's a big piece of it. And the second thing, which I've kind of mentioned throughout, when you're building software or when you're building any sort of solution to something, it's easy to take a simple problem and give a simple solution. It's also kind of easy to take a complex problem and give a complex solution. But it's really challenging to take a complex problem and give a simple solution. And that's something we talk about all the time, is landlords have complex problems. Some of these processes are not as simple as they seem. Different landlords do things differently. And that's one of the biggest takeaways that I think you'll find in Inago, especially as you transition into it, is that there's some subtle nuance to our features where you can do things that maybe you weren't able to do in other software platforms. You can handle all sorts of different tiny tasks that you need to in unique and different ways. And that's something we talk about a lot, something we put a lot of emphasis in. And I think it does make the transition into Inago a really exciting and fun one for new landlords.
Yeah. And I suppose once you do learn it and get the hang of it, it's all worth it, even if it does take you a little time to learn it. But with the support, it should be much easier, I believe. So yeah. It's great that you have that. So you mentioned a new feature that's coming that you made for yourself, but that other people will benefit from, which is your maintenance coordination. I think that is super helpful and useful. What other features do you have coming up on the horizon that we can look forward to?
Yeah, so one big one is tenant credit reporting. I think that there's a lot of applications out there on the property management side that put a ton of emphasis into the landlord's experience, but they don't necessarily put as much emphasis in the tenant's experience. And landlords, property managers, you got to remember the tenants are the ones paying the bills, right? You want them to have a positive experience. You want to make it really easy for them to get rental payments in, to do all the other things that they need to within the system. So we're always trying to service that. I think you'll find that the tenant app, and we have a dedicated one, is really easy for tenants to use and engage with, but we're always looking for different angles to bring value to tenants as well. And one of those is tenant credit reporting. So tenants will be able to sign up for a service that helps them build their credit score by paying rent. So it creates additional incentive to pay their rent on time. It creates additional value for these tenants, especially good tenants that are always paying their rent. They can boost their credit score up. It's just a great feature all around for tenants. And because of that, it's a great feature for landlords too.
I like that.
And just one more feature to add. So we've had a tenant mobile app for over the last year, and pretty much once a day, someone asks me this question when they sign up for Inago or they're interested in Inago. They say, do you have a landlord app? And my answer always is no. And I remind Dave of that every day. So finally, Dave and I are going to end this conversation for once and for all. And we are pleased to announce that we're releasing a landlord app mid-August. So stay tuned for that. We'll definitely send out some information on that. Something we're really excited about. The reason it took 12 months is because we wanted to make it not just good, but great. And we've done a lot of beta testing. We've taken a lot of time getting user feedback. And it's something I think everyone's going to love. And we're really excited about it. So be on the lookout for the mobile app for landlords coming out mid-August.
That's actually really exciting. I can't wait to see it. I definitely want to take a look at it when I get the chance. So I would like to quickly just share that Inago is doing a full-blown hour-long webinar with us next week. We are super excited about it. I am sharing my screen right now. This is the AAOA website. You can go here under education and live webinars to see the webinar they're going to be hosting next week. This webinar is going to really focus on the nitty-gritty of property management software and how to get the most out of it, how to grow your business through it. So this can really help you determine whether or not you're going to do it or how to get started. I think it's going to be really helpful. And I'm really happy to have you both back next week to talk about it. And then I think if those of you on the call that do want to just try this out right now, you can go to inago.com, which is this site here, Inago, INNAGO.com. Dave and Tanvir, do you have anything else for the audience to get a hold of you, or is the website the best way to go about it?
Website's great. You can also check us out on social media. It's Inago Software is typically our handle on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the major sites you'd expect. But going through the website is awesome. We do have, as Tanvir has mentioned, a phone line. So call us up. Our phone number is listed on the website directly, so anybody can call. Tanvir, anything you want to add there?
No, our sales and customer support lines are both on the website on Inago. So down at the bottom, contact us. You can find our numbers there. We're happy to help answer any questions you have.
Okay, great. Well, this was fun. I'm so glad I got to learn a little bit more about both of you and Inago. So I'm looking forward to having you back next week on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, in case anyone needs to know. Put it in your calendars. And I'll be in touch with you guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Awesome.
Thanks, Alexandra.